All right, we have made it to Friday, everybody. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the rise of big business and these big business owners. So that our essential question for today is, how was America transformed by the rise of big business and corporate monopolies? So here are the standards that we are addressing today. Very similar to the other standards that we've addressed throughout the week, minus a couple, just because we're focusing on business owners and not immigrants and things of that nature. Okay, so what does the term industrialization mean? So that's going to be one of the discussions that you'll have in class. And essentially, industrialization just means a growth in industry, a growth in factories, growth in business. And so industrialization is huge, like we talked about on Tuesday of this week, for this Gilded Age era because of this growth in industry. And now we're building a lot more. We have more factories, more businesses, so on and so forth. So factors that help to support industrialization: mining in the West, immigration. So we know those immigrants come in and they provide that cheap labor source, government subsidies and tax concession to railroads. Basically, the government at many times will give certain companies like a tax, like a tax concession just means that like they don't have to pay the same kind of taxes as like average people. And government subsidies, government sometimes will give businesses money to kind of start up, because eventually the idea is that if businesses do well, people will make money and the government will make money off of that. Advancements in communication, which we talked about earlier this week. Corporation charters, which a charter is just giving the corporation the ability to exist. Laissez-faire attitude of government. This is going to be this hands-off government. So government doesn't get involved in business affairs and lets businesses run themselves with a lack of government regulation and control. The Bessemer process, remember we talked about that's a quicker, easier way to mass produce steel, and that's going to be really good for a lot of this construction and growth of business. High tariffs. So a tariff is a tax on imported goods. A protective tariff just means that this tax is added to encourage people to purchase domestic made products, because this tax is going to cause foreign goods to be higher cost-wise than domestic made products. Entrepreneurs, these are individuals that start up their own businesses. We also have vertical and horizontal integration, which we'll talk a little bit more in depth today. This is how these big businessmen gain control of their wealth and the industry. National markets, so being able to sell to many different areas in the nation, and Civil War profits and foreign investment. So these are just things that help with that growth of industry and business. Industrial expansion changed America after the Civil War. So huge businesses began to form. We're going to talk about some of those. Industrialists, or these owners, brought up small companies and merged them into large corporations. These business owners became known as two different nicknames. So robber barons or captains of industry. We've seen this political cartoon over here to the left, the right, excuse me, earlier this week, where we have these big businessmen up at the top and we've got the regular workers at the bottom. So are they robber barons or captains of industry? Well, wealthy industrialists use many ruthless business tactics to drive competitors out and get rich. Some of them paid low wages, they wouldn't allow their workers to go on strike, and they had secret agreements behind closed doors. So the term robber baron is the negative nickname for these men. They're business owners. This is a thought that business owners are corrupt and greedy. Captains of industry is the more positive nickname, and this thought that they were just good businessmen. They're smart and they took their opportunities. So there's two ways to look at it. It kind of just depends on your viewpoint. So we're going to go through some of these robber barons and how they gained their wealth. So the first one, Vanderbilt. He is the railroad. One way it helps me to remember Vanderbilt as the railroads is Vanderbilt built the railroads. So what he did was he lowered prices to drive people out of business, then raised his prices again. So he makes his prices super, super low, so everybody wants to use his railroad, and then jacks the prices up once all of the other railroad companies go out of business, and you have no choice but to use his company. Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie is a poor Scottish immigrant, and he struck it rich. So he's kind of like that American dream for many immigrants. Poor, and he strikes it rich, so rags to riches. So he forms the U.S. Steel Company, and he comes up with these new machines that made products more cheaply. He didn't come up with the Bessemer process, but he does use this, and this is a way to mass produce steel. So you're producing steel at large numbers and being very, very efficient. Now, one thing about Carnegie is he was one of those who wanted to give back. So he wrote this Gospel of Wealth. And in this, he's basically saying that it's the duty of the rich to give away their wealth to help society as a whole. And he gave away quite a bit of his money to the poor. But if you remember, when we were talking about immigration, he made $23 million in 1 year. So he could kind of afford, many people argue, to give away a lot of his wealth and still live a good life. John D. Rockefeller. So he is the owner of the Standard Oil Company. He unified many oil refineries in Cleveland and gained control of 90% of the industry. And the way that he did this was he created trusts, which is just a group of people who ran separate companies into one large corporation. So it's kind of like a bureaucratic like hierarchy. And you've got like him at the top, and then he's got people who then have people who then have people who run all of the smaller businesses. He pays his workers low wages, and he does the same thing that Vanderbilt did by lowering his prices, driving out the competitors, and then raising his prices again. JP Morgan. So Morgan is the money man. That's how I remember him. He's the money man. Morgan is the money man. And he is involved in investment banking. You can have all of these companies, you can have all of these industries and businesses, but they need money. So how do they get that money? Well, they go through a guy like JP Morgan. And these large companies need money to finance their growth, and they create holding companies. So some holding companies will buy up stock of other businesses to get their profits. So the stock market is pretty complicated, but on the surface, we'll just do like the bare basics of stock market. With the stock market, when you purchase stocks in a company, you are essentially loaning that company money, and in hopes that that business and that company will grow and you'll make your money back. And so a lot of these companies would invest stock in these businesses, and as the businesses grow, the stock prices go up. Then when you take your stocks out, you've made money. And so these holding companies are making money off of the businesses that are flourishing through their investments. So how was this wealth gained? So there's a couple of different ways that they were able to buy up different companies. So we've got horizontal integration and vertical integration. So horizontal integration is when you buy similar companies to reduce competition. So if we look at our example here, the stages of oil production. So you have to drill it, then you transport it, then you refine it, then you sell and distribute it. So essentially, if I own Standard Oil, I would buy up a bunch of refining companies. So all of the other companies would have to go through me to use that step of production. Okay. Another way to look at it is, let's use this example of, say I have a t-shirt company. Okay. And or let's do tennis shoes. So I have a tennis shoe company, sneaker, whatever you call them, and I'm Nike. Okay, so horizontal integration would be I buy up Adidas, Pumas, New Balance, so on and so forth. So you're buying up the similar companies to reduce competition. You're doing it horizontally. Vertical integration. This is buying companies in order to gain the materials. So in this example over here, we've got the stages of steel production. So mining, transportation, smelting, refining, and rolling. So Carnegie, he's going to buy a mining company, he's going to buy a transport company, he's going to buy a smelting, then he's going to buy a refining and rolling, so that he doesn't have to outsource any of those steps. Whereas all these other businesses, they got to go through this company and this company and this company. No, everything's going to be done in-house. So that's the two ways. Vertical is you're buying up all the steps of production. Horizontal is you're buying up similar companies. Okay? And so if we go back to our tennis shoe, our sneaker example, I'm Nike, and I'm going to buy up the cotton fields where they grow the cotton in order to make the shoes. Rubber company, I'm going to buy that. I'm going to buy a transport company to get the raw materials to the factory. I'm going to buy up the factory, the sewing machine, so on and so forth. And I'm going to buy up a transport company to get the shoes out to where they need to go. Okay, so that's vertical. So horizontal, you're buying up similar companies. So Nike is going to buy up all the different tennis shoe companies. Vertical, I'm going to buy all the steps of production. All right, so monopolies. Robber barons created monopolies. And let's think about the game of Monopoly. If you've ever finished a game, how do you win? Well, the way you win Monopoly is you own the most of the board you can. Right? Because you want to get all the money, and we run out of money. So the more you own and control on the board, the greater your chance of winning the game. Well, a monopoly is the same kind of thing. Monopoly is a corporation that is so powerful it can block competition. So when we hear the term that like they monopolize an industry, that's what that means. That they have full control. There's no competition. There's no other companies that can compete with them. So what are some advantages of being a monopoly? Well, for one, you have total control. Two, you set the prices because you don't have any competition. Now, one thing about these monopolies is, like I said, they have complete control over everything. They've blocked out all of the competition. Social Darwinism. So the robber barons became very, very wealthy while other people were very, very poor. Most people were very, very poor, actually. So to justify the difference between the rich and the poor, they turned to Darwin's theory of evolution, which we know that is the scientific theory of survival of the fittest, like we see in the visual over here to the left, that man has evolved from primates. Well, they took this theory and applied it to social situations. So essentially, this is the idea that those who are on top are there because they're fit to be. So rich people are rich because they deserve it. Poor people are poor because they're lazy and they don't deserve it. And so people who believe in this social Darwinism, they want a laissez-faire or hands-off government. So the government usually supports businesses because they're going to make money off of them. They do this protective tariff, which is that tax on imported goods to help encourage people to buy domestic-made products and help businesses grow and develop. They give money and land to support railroad growth, and they allow unlimited immigration for that cheap labor supply. Now, eventually, the government does respond with the Sherman Antitrust Act, where they tried to break up monopolies and trusts to increase competition, and it outlawed monopolies. It wasn't very effective at first, but eventually it became more effective. And fast forward to today, monopolies are illegal. So certain companies aren't even allowed to merge. So for instance, they'll probably never allow like Verizon and Sprint to merge, because if those two big cell phone companies merge, they'll dominate and monopolize the entire industry. And that wouldn't be fair to the consumer. So today's activity is a political cartoon analysis. All right, so you are going to choose two cartoons. So there's, I believe, 6 in all. So you're just going to choose 2 of them, and you're going to fill out this chart. So give me the year, what images, symbols are used to display power, who are the victims, and how are they portrayed, and then why do they use an octopus? Because every single cartoon uses an octopus. So why would they use that to and what is the octopus trying to symbolize? So that's today's assignment.